I remember the night we left like a brand the earth will never forget, burned clean into the height of time and still smoking somewhere behind my ribs. The moon hung low and heavy, swollen like a secret not meant for quiet places, casting silver over Main Street where the town slept with one eye closed and the other dreaming of things it was never brave enough to do. I rode slow, hat low, heart loud, and she rode beside me wrapped in a coat too big for her, eyes bright like freedom lit a lamp behind them. The sheriff's daughter. Not stolen, not tricked, not dragged, she chose the saddle and the shadow and me. Hard to say which one cursed her more. I never meant to take her from the life she knew meant to walk in, buy a drink, leave my dust on the floor, and ride on like ghosts do when they've promised themselves not to haunt anyone again. But she looked at me like a man is not a danger but a door. And when someone sees a door where the world swears there's only a wall, you feel a duty to open. So I did. And now every hoofbeat behind us sounded like judgment sneaking up to bite the heel of our hope. The sheriff was a man carved from law, stone jaw, and colder heart. Good with a badge, better with a rifle, worst with losing. Especially losing her. And here we were, two hearts riding against the grain of every rule this land worshipped. Folks say love's a blessing. They never rode with it when it was hunted. They never saw it shine in the dark and still be afraid. I kept one hand on the reins and the other near iron, not to shoot first, but to protect second, because love don't turn a man soft. It sharpens him where life might dull him. The road ahead stretched like a promise made by a liar or a preacher. Either way, it demanded belief. She leaned toward me in the dark. Do you regret it? That voice was soft like dusk wind, but powerful enough to drag heaven down if it wanted. Not the riding, I whispered. Maybe the consequences. She laughed low, like a woman who knew consequences were wolves that only ate the fearful. It echoed into the trees, a sound both fragile and fearless. And somewhere far behind us, the town exhaled like it had just realized we were gone, like it had held its breath hoping we might not be fools. Too late. We were already on the road fools take before they become legends or headlines. I prayed for the former. I prepared for the latter. Night swallowed our tracks, but destiny, like lawmen, don't miss much. Asterisk, the first sunrise after running always tastes like half victory and half doom, and I swallowed both without complaint. The sky broke open pink and gold above the ridge, dust lifting from our horses' steps like tired prayers. She leaned her cheek against her saddle horn, weary but shining, like a saint who'd chosen sin and still felt holy inside it. I kept scanning the horizon, trusting instinct more than light, because sunlight only shows the world as it is, instinct shows what's coming to change it. I expected riders. Expected dust like smoke from the law's fire. The sheriff wouldn't sit polite and let time decide if I was villain or fool. He'd ride before breakfast, maybe before thought. Some fathers chase love with blessings. Others chase it with bullets. Hers used the latter. We broke bread and silence beside a creek. She watched the water like it carried her old life downstream. My daddy ain't evil, she whispered. Just afraid. Good men do worse things scared than bad men do angry, I said, and I meant every thread of it. She nodded slow, wind touching her hair like it had sworn to follow her anywhere she went. Will he kill you? She asked. Not if I outride his doubt, I answered. And if he has none? She pressed. Then I die honest. Honest about what? That I didn't leave you. I chose you. Her eyes softened like dawn shading into day, heavy and gentle all at once. She didn't touch me. Didn't need to. Some truths sit between souls with no hands required. We saddled again, not hurried, but not lazy, and the road rolled out dry and certain. Every crow call sounded like warning, every gust like footsteps chasing. But she rode upright, chin high, as if fear itself had been told to stay behind. Courage looks different in women. It carries flowers and steel in the same breath. If I was riding for pride, I'd die soon. But I wasn't. I was riding for her. And a man riding for love will not fall easy. Asterisk, we hit the foothills by midday. sun high and unforgiving, turning the dirt into a mirror for sweat and doubt. That land rolled harsh like it refused to be tamed, all jagged stone and stubborn brush, the kind of terrain that judges a rider's patience harder than his aim. She handled it like she'd been born on the saddle, not in a whitewood house with curtains that kept the world polite. Every time her horse stumbled, she steadied him, murmuring quiet encouragement like only those raised in softness can do without sounding foolish. And each time she did, I felt heat in my chest that wasn't sun. Men don't fall for beauty. Men fall for bravery disguised as grace. Around mid-ridge, I spotted dust. Far behind. Slow, steady, inevitable. The sheriff's hunt wasn't frantic. He wasn't chasing a criminal. He was reclaiming property life told him was his. And a man who believes he owns justice don't rush to get it. He lets fate sweat instead. We found shade under a rock shelf. I tore jerky, handed her half. Her lips held hunger and hesitation. If we stop now, she whispered, we might never outrun him. Rest ain't surrender, I said. It's promise. She didn't understand at first, then her brows eased. Promise of what? That we'll still be strong when he arrives. She looked out past the ridgeline and sighed, a sound full of childhood leaving her. He'll look at me, she murmured, and I'll want to go home. Wanting ain't wrong, I answered. Going back to chains is... She didn't flinch, but her voice tightened like reins before a buck. Chains? Silk can tie same as iron, I said. Expectation can be a prison too. And in that heat, with dust thick in the breath of the earth, and a lawman's shadow chasing us like a ghost with a badge, she nodded once like a vow. The kind that breaks bone before it breaks. We mounted again, silent as hunted wolves. And the wind slipped past us, whispering what the horizon already knew. Running is easy. Choosing where you're running toward is the real trial. Asterisk. Night fell like a curtain dropped by a tired god. Stars pricking through, as if heaven still tried to eavesdrop on fools. We camped by a dead oak, split by lightning, half ghost, half shelter. Fire crackled low, sparks rising like whispers fleeing the earth. She sat wrapped in her coat, hair catching the flames' glow like threads of copper fate had woven special. I sharpened my knife not for use but for comfort. Steel is company in the dark when conscience gets loud. She broke the silence first. You think we're wrong? I think right and wrong are easier to measure from a porch than a saddle, I answered. And we left porches behind. She pulled her knees close, eyes studying mine like she could read my sins the way scholars read scripture line by line. Quietly horrified but enthralled. My daddy will hate you forever. Men hate what scares them, I murmured. And love scares every man who ain't ready to deserve it. She swallowed heavy. I shouldn't have asked you to take me. You didn't. I did. No, I whispered. You chose to ride. I chose to keep pace. Fire popped like a gun cracked in jealousy. She winced. I didn't. I'd lived too long where sound kills only the unprepared. Is love always pain? She asked. Love, I said slowly, ain't pain. It's the courage to face pain and call it a fair trade. Her eyes filled, not weak, not girlish, but like someone mourning a life they never asked to betray. He raised me, she whispered. I know, I said softly. And now you're raising yourself. Tears didn't fall. She didn't need to bleed to change. But her breath stuttered like a colt the first time it sees open range. I let her feel it. Didn't soothe. Didn't lie. Freedom don't come cheap. Fire died to embers. Coyotes sang funerals and victories alike. And far off in the dark, one horse snorted the sheriff's mount, tired but relentless, scenting our guilt or our courage. Hard to say which trail he followed. Maybe both. Either way, morning would bring reckoning, and reckoning always tastes like metal before it arrives. Dawn found us already saddled, breath fogging pale and thin, hearts thick and heavy. The world looked washed in regret and bravery, both, the kind of light that makes a person believe they might rewrite their fate if they ride hard enough. She sat straight, jaw set, eyes red from things deeper than tears. She did not look like a girl stolen. She looked like a woman choosing. The sheriff crested the hill just past sunbreak. He didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't shoot. He sat his horse like righteousness given flesh. Broad shoulders, iron sheriff star, burning in the first gold light, rifle slung polite but eager. His hat shadowed his eyes, but I didn't need to see them to feel the verdict. She froze, breath shattering like glass stepped on by truth. I eased my horse forward one pace, hand nowhere near my gun. "Morning," I called, voice even as a judge reading names off tombstones. He didn't answer. His gaze moved from me to her to the road behind us like he was measuring betrayal by miles. Then he spoke, and the world tightened to hear it. "Come home." No anger, no threat. Just command built from years of obedience. She shifted, saddle leather sighing like regret. "Daddy?" The word cracked the air, hurt sharper than any bullet. He lifted a hand, not to strike, not to soothe, but to claim. "You're done playing outlaw." She trembled. Small twitch. Enough to tell me the fight inside her wasn't with me. It was with the child she used to be. "Sir," I said, quiet. "Respect, not surrender. She rides because she chose to." His jaw tightened. "You think you gave her choice?" "She gave me mine." Silence fell like snow no one prayed for. Then his voice hardened. "Step aside. She ain't a horse to lead," I said, "nor a calf to rope." She shut her eyes. One tear escaped, small, honest, deadly. "I can't go back," she whispered. Her father swallowed rage like whiskey he didn't want but needed. "I raised you." "You raised me to stand," she said. "I'm standing." It broke him more than bullets ever could. And I swear the sky dimmed a little watching a man lose the one thing he loved exactly because he loved it wrong. "If he dies," the sheriff growled, "that blood's yours." "I know," she whispered. "So do I murmured. "Because freedom kills something in everyone, whether they chase it or try to cage it." Asterisk, he dismounted slow, boots heavy with years and heartbreak. Every step forward was a sermon in grief. I stayed still. Drawing first never proved manhood-only panic. He looked me over like a craftsman examining wood before carving it into grave planks. "You planning to fight me?" he asked. "No," I said. "Planning to live." "A man who steals a daughter from her father don't live long." "A man who tries to own a daughter don't understand love," I answered. He twitched like a strike horse caught that first sting of whip. "She's mine." "She was," I said softly. "Now she's hers." Rage cracked through him then, not wild but carved precise. He wasn't a man undone, he was a man being remade by loss. "Draw," he said, voice dry enough to burn. "Won't," I answered. His hand hovered over steel. Mine stayed still. "Coward," he spat. "No," I whispered. "I'm tired." His brow furrowed, not expecting that answer. Tired men are dangerous. But tired men with love are unpredictable. "You think she loves you?" he asked her. She didn't answer with words. She rode her horse one step toward me. Just one. Enough. The sheriff's heart broke so loud I swear the birds stopped singing. He drew not fast like a gunfighter, but heavy like a father forced into war against time itself. I didn't move until I had to. Then I leaned, struck with my voice instead of steel. "Don't make her dig 2 graves." It hit him harder than bullets. He froze, his gun shook. And he looked at her. Really looked. Saw not rebellion. Saw adulthood. Saw the person he raised choosing her own ending to the story he wrote. His shoulders sagged. Not surrender. Respect's painful brother. "Go," he whispered. "But if he hurts you, he won't," she breathed, voice iron soft. He nodded once. Then twice. Then he turned away before his tears could betray his legend. Asterisk, we rode in silence long after his figure shrank to memory. Every hoofbeat felt like forgiveness grinding into dirt, every breath a ribbon of relief and fear braided tight. The world seemed bigger without him chasing us, bigger and heavier. She leaned into me, not for safety, but gratitude. I thought he'd kill you, she murmured. So did I said. You weren't afraid? I was, I answered. But I wasn't wrong. She smiled without joy, without innocence, smiled like someone who understood freedom ain't sunshine, it's weather. Where do we go now? She asked. Someplace honest, I said. Where's that? Where no one knows who we were. She nodded slow, like accepting exile in exchange for a heartbeat that belonged only to her. Do you ever regret who you had to become? She asked. Every day, I said. But not enough to become who I was. She breathed deep, filling herself with the future like it was cold river water she had to swallow to survive. Ahead lay nothing promised, nothing safe. Just wide land and sky big enough to bury mistakes in. Behind lay history, pain, and a man who loved enough to let go only when holding on hurt worse. We were no heroes, no villains. Just two souls walking out of one life into another, hoping not to lose each other along the way. Asterisk, the next town didn't greet us with bullets or questions. Only dust and quiet like everything here lived between heartbeats. We took room above a livery stable, wood thin enough to hear horses breathe and wind argue with old nails. She sat by the window, watching the world not look for her anymore. I cleaned my revolver, not because I meant to use it, but because steel rusts quicker when regret touches it too long. Do you miss him already? I asked. She didn't turn. I missed the part I was when he looked at me with love. That part ain't gone, I said. Just growing into someone bigger. She laughed soft. Growth hurts. So does standing still, I answered. Downstairs a horse stomped, restless or dreaming. Night settled like an old quilt, heavy but warm. We shared bread, water, silence. Then she asked, what if love makes us enemies to everyone else? Then everyone else will learn late what we learned early, I said. Love don't follow maps. It burns them. She stared at me, eyes deep as dawn wells. You think this ends happy? I think happiness ain't an ending, I said. It's a choice. One we'll have to make again and again. She didn't argue. Didn't fear. She understood. And right there, under thin boards and borrowed peace, we sealed our fate not with fire, but with stubborn belief that every man is allowed one story, where he chooses his own heart, even if the world don't approve. Asterisk, months passed like slow gun smoke, drifting but not forgotten. We worked ranches, rode fence lines, earned coin with sweat instead of bullets. She stitched clothes at the mercantile, her needle dancing like hope in the hand of someone who refuses to give up on stitching broken futures back together. People talk sometimes, two strangers living quiet always draws suspicion. But suspicion ain't proof, and proof ain't truth, and truth ain't always welcome anyway. We kept to ourselves. Nights were gentle, days honest. And if sometimes she woke with tears on her cheeks, I didn't ask why. Some heartaches ain't wounds, they're gardens growing in places you didn't expect beauty to live. One evening, as the sun died in gold and blood across the ridgeline, she asked, Do you think he forgives me? Forgiveness, I said, ain't a gift the giver controls. It's a peace the receiver earns. And I hope he finds it, she whispered. He will, I said. Men break loud, but they heal quiet. She rested her head against my arm, and I realized the West teaches love different than cities do. Cities ask if love feels good. The West asks if love endures. And ours did. In dust, in silence. In mornings when the world seemed too harsh to hold gentle things. We endured. Asterisk news travels slower in the West, but it travels truer. One day, a rider passed through with a paper from a town 2 valleys away. Sheriff dead. Fever. No last word spoken, but his badge was placed on his grave by his own hand hours before he fell. Men don't choose when to die, but they sometimes choose how. She read the notice with trembling lips but steady breath. Grief bloomed quiet across her face. Not a storm, a season. He died a lawman. she whispered. He died a father, I corrected. Those ain't the same, she said. No, I murmured. But maybe they were finally equal in him. She wiped her eyes. Not like a girl. Like a woman collecting herself after meeting truth in a cold hallway. We should go back, she said. Say goodbye. We can, I whispered. But no town deserves to watch your grief like it's entertainment. She steadied, thought, chose. Then let's say goodbye here, where I'm not who I was. We climbed a hill, sat beneath a juniper tree. She spoke to wind like it was his ear. Told him she loved him. Told him she hated how love feels like punishment sometimes. Told him she forgave him. Not for chasing, but for believing she was his shadow instead of his sunrise. When she finished, she looked at me with eyes full of clean sky. There, she said. Now he rests. And I swear I felt the earth loosen, like something buried was finally breathing free beneath our boots. Time has a strange way of bending around choices, like barbed wire bending around fence posts it refuses to let go of. Months faded into seasons, seasons into years, and while the world changed around us, part of us never left that first night on the road, when fear and faith were the same horse galloping under our ribs. We had carved a life out here, not grand, not famous, but stubborn and honest. And some nights I believed that was enough to outrun fate forever. But fate ain't wind. Wind passes. Fate circles back like a hawk that remembers the field where its prey once fled. One crisp evening, autumn shifting toward frost, I heard riders on the northern ridge. Slow hooves, not hurried, but purposeful. A sound walked into my bones before it reached my ears. She was inside sewing a tear in my coat, humming the tune she always hummed when she forgot she wasn't a girl in a porch swing anymore. I stepped off the porch and let the wind carry truth to my skin. Trouble wasn't always loud. Sometimes it arrived gentle, like regret in boot leather. The riders crested the hill, 4 silhouettes against a bruised sky, moving like judgment wearing saddles. Their coats marked them as law or men pretending to be it. I didn't wake fear. I woke memory. They rode slow into the yard. Dust settled around my boots like old prayers returned for payment. The lead rider wasn't the sheriff. He was younger, hungrier, eyes sharp like glass chipped in anger. Badge pinned crooked, jaw tight with purpose he hadn't earned yet. You the one they call the runaway cowboy? He said. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence buys time to weigh the world. You left a town, he continued. Took what wasn't yours, walked away from the law. His words tasted borrowed. His courage did too. I took nothing but a choice, I said, and I paid for it by living it. He smirked like boys do when they mistake posture for power. Law says different. Law, strange word. Heavy in some mouths, hollow in others. Your law, I said, or truth? Same thing, he spat. And that's when I knew he was more dangerous than her father ever was. A man who knows the difference between law and truth can be reasoned with. A man who believes they are the same is just a weapon waiting for a hand. She here? He asked. I didn't answer, didn't need to. His eyes drifted toward the window like wolves drift toward lambs. And I felt the whole quiet world twist again, like strings tuning for another song I never wanted to play twice. He rested his hand near iron. Town wants her returned. Town didn't raise her, I said. Town didn't choose for her. Town don't care. Town remembers. He looked at me sharp as winter steel. You coming easy, or are we going to bury someone today? I breathed, slow, even, like a man sharpening a blade with patience instead of anger. Nobody's dying for your pride, I said. Not her, not me, not the truth. And the wind held its breath waiting to see what fate would shape next. He dismounted, boots landing with a crunch like brittle bone. His men stayed mounted, watching with that hungry stillness men wear when they hope violence comes to feed them. He took one step, then another. I didn't move. Steel never makes the first decision on my behalf. Not anymore, not after the price I paid learning patience is a sharper edge than any blade. You think you get to keep her? He sneered. I don't keep her, I said. I ride beside her. That's a fancy way of saying theft. That's a tired way of saying ownership. Something flickered in his jaw. Confusion, maybe fear. More likely the moment a boy realizes manhood ain't to something earned by holding a gun, but by knowing when not to. But pride takes men hostage worse than any outlaw. Girl belongs to the town, he hissed. Belongs, I whispered. The ugliest word a free throat can choose. He lunged. Not with bullets, with his hand, grabbing for my shirt like violence without iron-proved righteousness. I caught his wrist, firm, steady, without hate. Go back, I told him. Tell them she ain't coming. Tell them she grew up and walked past their fences. Tell them you saw a woman and not a possession. He strained, face red, pride boiling like bad whiskey in a cheap kettle. You can't talk the world into giving up rules, he spat. I ain't talking the world, I said softly. Only you, he shoved. I let him. Because sometimes letting a man think he won is kinder than showing him how little winning means. But the moment pushed sound through the door. She stepped out, saw hands on me, and her breath caught fire. Let him go, she said. Not pleading, command. And the young lawman froze, because there are voices born to obey, and his bones recognized hers even if his pride didn't. You ruined him, he said to her bitterly. No, she answered. He saved me from becoming you. That struck deeper than steel. Rage surfaced, wild, stupid, scared. He drew, quick, foolish. I moved without thinking, old instinct, old sin, hand on my revolver, but not to kill. Just to be faster than death, but she stepped between us, her back to my gun, her face to his. Shoot me first, she whispered, and the world snapped like dry branches under boot. He blinked, gun shaking. Future shifting in front of him faster than belief could keep pace. I ain't a killer, he muttered. Then don't act like one, she breathed. Wind passed. Leaves scratched truth into wood. Finally, his arm fell. Gun holstered. Chest heaving. Run, he whispered, not to me, to us. Run before they send someone who don't care who dies. He turned away while his men stared, confused, angry, ashamed, wishing they had the strength to make that same choice, but knowing they didn't. You do this, he said, and the world will hunt you forever. I stepped beside her, put my hand in hers. Then the world better saddle up, I answered, and we mounted. And rode, not like fugitives, like flames that refused to go out just because night showed up to test them. We rode until the sky bruised into evening again, until sweat dried on our backs and hearts steadied into something fiercer than fear. The land stretched wide like possibility nobody had claimed yet. Every horizon looked like a door instead of a wall. We found shelter in an abandoned miner's shack, roof barely holding, walls leaning like tired elders, but it stood. Sometimes that's all freedom needs. She sat by the window, watching dust trails fade behind us, and asked, Do you think we'll always run? I shook my head, slow. Running ain't the story. Becoming is. Becoming what? Whatever isn't owned, I whispered. She smiled, tired but shining. That smile had weathered doubt and danger, and still carried warmth like a campfire, refusing to quit. I lit a lantern. Settle the horses. Listen to silence like it was scripture. Out here, voices of the land speak without words. Wind preaching patience. Dirt preaching permanence. Stars preaching perspective. She unfolded a small keepsake she carried. A photograph, faded edges, of her as a child on her father's shoulders. For the first time since we fled, she didn't flinch at it. She laid it on the table, smoothing it flat like memory deserved tenderness even when it hurt. I don't hate him anymore, she whispered. Hate is just grief wearing spurs, I said. Comes off when you rest. She touched my hand, soft, certain. What are we, if not criminals? People who chose each other, I said. That ain't crime. That's courage, the lantern flickered. Outside, coyotes sang hunger and hope in the same note. She leaned her head on my chest. Not desperation, partnership. And in that moment, the world shrank to the size of two breathing hearts and one truth. Freedom is expensive, but captivity bankrupts the soul. Somewhere far off, gunfire echoed. Not at us, not tonight, but as a reminder that men fight over land, titles, pride. We fought only for a life neither law nor memory could dictate. What if tomorrow brings blood? She asked, voice steady but shadowed. Then tomorrow meets two people who didn't back down from living. And if tomorrow brings peace, then we thank it quiet and don't waste it. She exhaled, long and slow. I used to dream of dresses and dances, she said. Now I dream of mornings. Mornings are worth more, I murmured. And we fell asleep like pilgrims who hadn't reached heaven, but weren't willing to return to earth. Morning came knife-bright and cold enough to make breath look like ghosts leaving the mouth, and I stood in the shack doorway feeling the day test the edge of me the way a blacksmith tests temper against anvil. Listening to our horses stamp patience into the frost, watching the light gather itself slow over the high. Country like a promise that had finally learned to keep itself. And I understood we were past running and into something harder, the kind of living where you choose a direction and then choose it again. Every mile because doubt rides as far as any posse if you let it. So I saddled deliberate checked cinches twice, touched the colt only to be sure it was asleep. And when she joined me with her blanket over her shoulders and that ribbon cut from the old coat tying back her hair, I saw the woman the world had tried to name for itself and the woman she now named on her own, standing in the same skin without apology, and she said, "Mountains?" And I said, "Mountains," and we rode out of that leaning shack without looking back, letting the door swing on its hinge like a farewell the wind would finish, climbing toward switchbacks that scratched the ribs of the hills and into air, so clean it made the lungs. Confess, and the farther we went, the smaller our past looked until it was only a smudge where two people had once believed law could own a heartbeat. But the mountains didn't care for our drama. They cared for steps that landed true, and water carried wisely, and fires built small under the lee of stone. And so we learned the new commandments. Listen more than you speak. Tie high, tie short, boil snow slow. Never argue with weather. And when the sky puts iron in its voice, find timber before pride finds you, and at night, when the land turned blue and the wind combed the pines with cold fingers. She read the day off my face like a ledger, and I read strength in hers like scripture no preacher had ever earned. And we talked about names, about how folks back there might carve us as thieves or saints, but how the granite around us didn't file those reports. It just waited for seasons to write their long handwriting across its back. And we let the silence answer questions our tongues would have ruined. And on the third evening, we found a meadow cupped in rock where elk had printed their petitions, and a creek threaded through with the kind of patience only. Mountains practice, and we laid our blankets and lit a fire no bigger than a hat crown and ate the last of the hard. Bread with jerky that tasted like history, and she asked, if there were no eyes to judge us, what would we be? And I said, exactly this. And the answer didn't sound brave or foolish, only accurate, like a compass accepting north. And the stars came in silver battalions, and the moon rose thin and bright as a whetted blade. And somewhere far below in valleys we could no longer hear, men likely told the old story again, how the sheriff's daughter was stolen, how a scoundrel tricked her, how a posse almost saved her from herself, and the lie marched on because lies have better boots. But up where the air refused to carry gossip, we slept the kind of sleep that Dosen to borrow against tomorrow. And dawn broke like glass and gold milk, and we moved again, higher, learning that altitude is just honesty. You have to breathe slower to understand. And when a storm came sudden the way mountain storms write their own law, we tucked under an overhang and listened to thunder explain humility. And she laughed low because fear had found it could no longer take the saddle from her, and I realized the story wasn't about escape anymore. It was about arrival. Arrival at a life that didn't pay tithes to other people's comfort. Arrival at a code that put mercy before metal and chosen love before. Inherited authority, and as the storm slid away, dragging light like torn silk, we stepped out onto rock washed clean, and the tracks we left looked like signatures on a treaty only the two of us could honor. And when evening fell again, I told her about a boy I had been who thought winning was loud and loss was a door you kick in. And she told me about a girl she had been who thought safety was the same size as obedience. and we sat there between who we were and who we would not apologize for becoming, the fire making our faces into young maps and old truths. And if the world had wanted a spectacle, it would have been disappointed because nothing dramatic happened except that we kept choosing the same direction, which is how revolutions actually survive 1 faithful mile at a time. We came off the spine in a long corkscrew of shale and switchgrass to a valley so green it felt like the earth had been holding its breath for us, and finally exhaled, cottonwoods paging through bright leaves along a braided creek, meadowlarks writing melodies no court could indict, and there lay a homestead rotted to its rafters, orchard gone to scrag but not dead, posts leaning like old men telling better stories than their sons, and it looked like a place that had been abandoned by haste, not hatred. So we led the horses slow along the fence line, and I knocked on air out of manners, and then we walked through, light where door once was, and tasted dust that remembered bread. And she touched the mantle where sun cut a clean rectangle and said, "Here." And I knew she meant not a hiding place but a beginning. So we staked the ponies on the creek braid and set to work with the hunger of people who know shelter is earned every day. I lifted beams that argued with my back, and she cleared the hearth of bird nest and regret. We found a pump half jammed and worked the handle until water coughed up iron, and then memory, and then sweetness. And we laughed the exhausted laugh of settlers who had finally stopped pretending to be fugitives, and the days built their small bricks. Thatch patch roof tarred with pine pitch, a door hewn from a stall board latches whittled, a window mended with oiled cloth until glass could be bargained for in some distant town that didn't. To care if our names had borders and nights, we slept on straw that smelled like a promise and woke to frost that embroidered the sill with honest warnings, and she planted a small square by the fence with beans and hope, and I split wood into simple theology effort in warmth out, and the horses learned the new pasture's grammar and fattened on its sentences. And sometimes smoke wandered from our chimney in a straight line, and sometimes it wandered like a story trying to find the courage to end. And more than once I stood in the yard at sundown, listening for the sound of men who preferred to collect debts with iron, but the only riders were deer, and the only badges were stars. And in that grace we learned the habit of belonging that didn't require surrender. And on the 7th week a stranger came along the creek, leading a burro stacked with kettles and knives. A tinker with eyes like weather and manners that understood gates. And he greeted us like we said we were homesteaders, and we traded jerky and a pelt for nails and news, and the news was thin but clean. Far valleys talked of drought, the county seat elected a judge who drank tea, and in a town we used to know, people had started to say maybe the girl had never been stolen. Maybe she'd ridden by choice, maybe the sheriff had died of a fever of the body and not the heart, and truth was coming on at a mole's pace, the way truth usually does. And after the tinker left, she stood in the door with that oiled cloth window glow on her face and said, "When they talk, they make me smaller. When I work, I grow." And I told her the world had always preferred its women small and its men loud, and we were going to be the kind of weather that ruins those plans. And the orchard coughed up a handful of apples, pretending not to be feral, as she cooked them down with a fist of sugar. We desaved, and we ate that warm, tart honesty with hands and spoons, and a quiet that didn't ask the past as permission. And if this was exile, it tasted better than any home we had known. And if someday trouble hiked over those hills wearing a uniform made of other people's comfort, it would find two people who hadn't spent their days rehearsing how to beg, only how to build. And that kind of preparation changes the arithmetic of any confrontation. Because when love becomes infrastructure, it can't be sieged like a romance. Winter came hard as a collector with a ledger full of names. It came in gray sheets and white knives, and it asked questions about our resolve without using words. And we answered with wood piles stacked tight as stubbornness, with traps set along creek edges where mink signed their delicate signatures, with a roof that stopped apologizing and a door that learned to lean less. And in the evenings when the stove talked in iron tongues and the wind threaded needles of cold through every careless seam, we read each other's faces for weather reports and made maps out of memory. And sometimes she would take out the photograph of herself a lifetime small on her father, S shoulders, and place it by the oilcloth pane. so they could bless it, and there was no bitterness left in her fingers, only inventory. As if she were counting ingredients for a bread the past finally knew how to eat. And in that deep winter I dreamed the sheriff once. Not fever, not guilt, just a man in a snowfield tipping his hat. And I woke with tears that didn't embarrass me and told her. And she held my jaw like it was a handle to lift sorrow safely and said, "We'll teach our children his good parts and bury his bad with the snow." And there was a sentence with children inside it like coals banking heat for a future fire, and I laughed. At the audacity of hope that builds cradles in a land that used to build gallows. And when spring unclenched its fist, the creek sang louder than any jury. And we planted bigger, and a mare fold in the night. Longlegs surprised at belonging to earth, and we named her Mercy because names shape how you lean into storms. And by the time Meadow turned the color of forgiveness, I could walk the fence line and not think of pursuit, only perimeter. And I understood we had done more than survive. We had redefined our names in a grammar no courthouse could edit. And the day the first travelers of summer came up our path asking for water and directions, they saw a man and a woman in a house in a field, and they didn't see a story they could sell in town. They saw work, and work quiets gossip the way snow quiets tracks. And when one of them mentioned a legend down valley about a cowboy who ran with a lawman's daughter, I poured water and said, "Legends are what folks make when they re-starving for better bread." And he laughed and drank and left none the wiser that the legend had just handed him a dipper. And that night on the porch where the boards had learned our weight, she asked if I ever missed the thunder of a crowded room and the dice-roll courage of men who let whiskey rent their spines, and I said I missed it the way a man misses a wound. He touches the scar sometimes to remember what he survived, but he doesn't go looking for the knife. And she nodded and put her head to my shoulder, and the stars did their old arithmetic until the sun was morning, and one dawn bright, ordinary, sacred as bread. We heard small footsteps inside the house before the sun had finished its first word in a child. Slaff braided itself through the rafters like a brand new law we both wanted to obey forever. And I understood the ending wasn't a gunfight or a gallows or a chase into Monument Light. It was continuance. It was breakfast and fences and teaching small hands how to hold reins without making the animal forget it is free. It was the sheriff. S photograph moved from the mantel to a box, and then back to the mantel when forgiveness felt big enough to hold it. It was two riders learning to be settlers without letting the saddle die in them. It was a door that didn't slam when the wind argued it was. Neighbors who learned our names before they learned our rumor, and if one day a deputy or a judge or a boy wearing a badge like a borrowed, Jaw should ride up our lane to measure us against a story he prefers, he will find the arithmetic change beyond his appetite, a woman who chose, a man who didn't mistake restraint for weakness, a child laughing louder than the past, a field insisting that labor is the only honest witness, and when he asks, "Are you the two who ran?" I will tell him we are the two who arrived, and if his hand floats toward iron it will find no echo in mine, because the only thing I draw fast now is water, and in the evening when the smoke goes up straight and the coyotes choir at the edges and the first star signs the sky with a sheriff's careful pen, I will say the prayer that has kept me honest since the first barroom I refused to let decide my soul. Speak before you draw, warn before you answer, and leave the dead past in its hollow, and I will kiss the woman who turned fleeing into belonging, lift the child who turned legend into livelihood, and let the night close like a book, finished properly spined, unbroken margin, full of notes ending not a period, but a road that keeps going wide enough for all of us to ride without asking permission.